How are you, my good friends? Uh, Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Uh, Critical thinking is very important in reading, and most of the students they are feeling difficulty. I received a lot of the students I'm teaching. They have some problem with reading critical thinking, especially I'm talking about reading critical thinking. And also, when I'm talking about those students who are watching online or some from some angles they want to understand reading, they also have some problem. Uh, the problem which I mean, the main problem for the students is they do not understand what is critical reading because because most of the students they have, for example, uh, they don't understand the concept of reading comprehension. First, it is necessary to understand the concept of reading comprehension. Then you will be able to understand what is critical thinking. I'm talking about critical thinking, reading critical thinking. Okay. So first we go for the definition. What is the definition of reading critical thinking? Well, first, simple critical thinking. What is the definition of critical thinking? Simple critical thinking. Critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally, understanding the logical connection between ideas. Okay, critical thinking has been the subject of much debate and thought since the time of early Greek philosophers, such as Plato or I think Socrates also. So these were great philosophers, those who have already talked about critical thinking and has continued to be a subject of discussion into the modern age. For example, the ability to recognize fake news. That's one of the critical thinking. Critical thinking might be described as the ability to engage in reflective and independent thinking. Reflective and independent thinking. In a sense, thinking critically requires you to use your ability to reason. With reason, you're going to understand something. It is about being an active learner rather than a passive recipient of information. Okay. Critical thinkers rigorously question ideas and assumptions rather than accepting them at face value. They will always seek to determine whether the ideas, arguments, and findings represent the entire picture and are accepting them uh, for open to find that they do not, which they cannot. I mean, some of the things are hidden, which critical thinking can help you to find those things. Critical thinkers will identify, analyze, and solve problems systematically rather than by intuition or instinct. Try to understand. Some with critical thinking skills, we can say, uh, for example, if I have some critical thinking skill, then I will understand the link between ideas. Okay, I will determine the importance and relevance of arguments and ideas. I will recognize, building, and appraise arguments. Okay, I will have the ability to identify inconsistencies and errors in reasoning. Okay, that's very important. I will be able to approach problems in a consistent and systematic way. I will reflect on the justification of their own assumptions, my own assumptions, other people's assumption, their beliefs, and my values. So this is all about what you are thinking. When you have some understanding of critical thinking, you definitely go for these things. I think critical thinking is thinking about things in certain ways so as to arrive at the best possible solution in the circumstances that the thinker is aware of. Okay, in more everyday language, because reading is one of the skill of language. That's why I've mentioned every language. It is a way of thinking about whether whatever is presently occupying your mind, so that you come to the best possible conclusion. So that's why I think personally critical thinking is a way of thinking about particular things at a particular time. It is not the accumulation of facts and knowledge, or something that you can learn once and then use in that form forever, such as the 9 times table you learn and use in school. Because I learned and used that table in the school as well. I'm remembering 9 time table. Okay, the skills we need for critical thinking. Okay, for example, if I have critical thinking, I will have following skills. I think the skills that we need in order to be able to think critically are varied, different, and include observation, analysis, interpretation, reflection, okay, and evaluation. Sometimes also we go for inferencing. This is I'm talking with regard to reading, inferencing, explanation, problem solving, and decision making. So specifically, we need to be able to, number one, think about a topic or issue in an objective and critical way. Number two, we are able to identify the different arguments there are in relation to a particular issue. Number three, we evaluate a point of view to determine how strong or valid it is. Number four, when we have, for example, critical thinking questions, you have multiple choice question. Okay, you have to answer 1 out of 4. So this type of ability you must have. For example, number four, we have to recognize any weaknesses or negative point that there are in the evidence or argument. Okay. Provide structured reasoning and support for an argument that we wish to make. Okay. For example, somebody says, I had a part of flesh, and behind me there was an eagle, okay, walking with me, and the eagle they took it and flew. That flew away. It's unbelievable. Your critical thinking cannot. You can recognize that eagle doesn't have the feet. Eagle has only the wings, can fly, but cannot walk with you. Okay, so that's critical thinking. This means this man is blind. So that's the critical thinking. But there is a process for critical thinking. You should be able aware that none of us think critically at all the time. Even myself, I do a lot of mistakes. I cannot, especially, I have a weakness to recognize people because I was grown up as a lone child, not in a family. Okay, I don't have that critical thinking. If I had lived with a family or tribes, I must have critical thinking to understand what the other people are thinking behind me, what is behind them. I was very good at education. I was very good at, skills in education, getting jobs. I worked at, very good skills in universities. Many universities I worked. I taught in many universities abroad. Okay, I taught in Pakistan. Some colleges I taught in Pakistan. Many universities I taught abroad, but I did not have this skill because this is I felt myself critical that when I'm talking to others, I confront because I don't have the ability. If I had been grown in a family dealing with other people, I must have that skill. So this is one of the skills when you are growing with families and tribes, you have critical thinking skill. But those who are grown alone, like me, they don't have this critical thinking skill. Sometimes we think in any way, but critically, for example, when our self-control is affected by anger, grief, or joy, or when we are feeling just plain, bloody minded, we cannot critically think. Anger actually can eat all things. You cannot think critically. It eats the wisdom. On the other hand, the good news is that since our critical thinking ability varied according to our current mindset, most of the time we can learn to improve our critical thinking ability by developing certain routine activities and applying them to all problems that present themselves. Okay, that present themselves. Once you understand the theory of critical thinking, improving your critical thinking skills takes persistence and practice. Most of the people are connecting it to artificial intelligence also, but I personally think that critical thinking is your personal ability, is your personal intelligence to understand things around you. Think of something, for example, I give you one example. Think of something that someone has recently told you. Then ask yourself the following question. What are the following questions? Who said it? Someone you know? Someone in a position of authority or power? Does it matter who told you this? Okay. What did he say? Did he give facts or opinion? Okay. Did he provide all the facts? Did he had anything out? You can think about it. Where did I mean? Some there were some people. Where did they say it? Was it in public or in private? Did other people have a chance to respond and or provide an alternative account? Okay. When did they say? Was it before, during, or after an important event? Is timing important? Whether they are luring you, whether they want to cheat you, whether they want to give you more information. That's your critical thinking. You have to understand. Why did they say it? Did they explain the reason behind their opinion? Okay, were they trying to make someone look good or bad? Are they prejudiced or are they right? So their facts are right, true, or facts are not true, or the facts are false. Or their statements are true or not, their arguments are true or not. How did they say it? Were they happy or sad, angry or indifferent to you? Did they write it or say it? Could you understand what was said? Probably when somebody opened the mouth, it gives you a lot of critical thinking with his wording and his behavior and his signals. So when somebody is not speaking and is keeping quiet, actually he is not exposing himself. So what are you aiming to achieve when you have the critical thinking? Okay, one of the most important aspect of critical thinking is to decide what you are aiming to achieve and then make a decision based on a range of possibility. Okay, once you have clarified that aim for yourself, you should use it as the starting point in all future situations requiring thought and possibly further decision making where needed. Make your workmates, family, or those around you aware of your intention to pursue this goal. You must uh, then discipline yourself to keep on track until changing circumstances. Okay, and circumstances means you have to revisit the start of the decision making process. However, there are things that get in the way of simple decision. Same is when you are doing an exam and you have the critical thinking questions for reading and you have multiple choice, you should be very careful because we all carry with us a range of likes and dislikes. Learned behaviors and personal preferences developed throughout our lives, they are the hallmarks of being human. But you should not be affected by them. Because critical thinking, you should be having unbiased attitude, using your intelligence. A major contribution to ensuring we think critically is to be aware of these personal characteristics, preferences, and biases, and make allowance for them when considering possible next steps, whether they are the pre uh, action consideration stage or as a part of rethink caused by unexpected or unforeseen impediments to continued progress. I think most important thing is what you have to think. The more clearly we are aware of ourselves, our strengths and weaknesses, the more likely our critical thinking will be productive. Okay, that's very important. So, what is the benefit of foresight? When you have critical thinking, this means you have the foresight. You can see some future. You can see what is behind the things, what the people are thinking. If I do this, I will be lost for my this future. So perhaps the most important element of thinking critically is foresight. Almost all decisions we make and implement don't prove disastrous if we find reasons to abandon them. However, our decision making will be infinitely better, okay, and more likely to lead to success if when we reach a tentative conclusion, we pause and consider the impact on the people and activity around us. I give you one example. Once I was traveling in a train when I was a young boy, traveling alone from Lahore to Multan city. It was almost 7, 8 hours at that time. Many years ago, somebody gave me. There were some people, a group of people in that. They found me. I was a lone child there. They tried to give me biscuits in a packet. I did not eat because I suspect them. And they tried to ask me, "Where are you going?" I did not tell them. And when they tried to ask me, "Where is your house?" Blah, blah, I did not reply them. I just changed the compartment, I went to another compartment to avoid them. I had critical thinking that these people are not good and they're going to have some ill omen for me. Okay, so the element needing consideration are generally numerous and varied. In many cases, consideration of one element from different perspective, okay, that perspective you are using will reveal potential dangers in pursuing our decision. For instance, moving a business activity to a new location may improve potential output considerably, but it may also lead to the loss of skilled workers if distance moved is too great. Which of these is the more important consideration? Is there some way of lessening the conflict? For example, one of the example is that my critical thinking to leave one university to join another university, one university where I worked almost more than 5 years. I resigned from that university because I had to commute for my job almost 300 kilometers daily. So I decided to go another university which was within the center of the university, and I went another university, joined as another university for teaching. So this is critical thinking. Okay, these are sort of problems that may arise from incomplete critical thinking, a demonstration perhaps of the critical importance of good critical thinking, okay, which I told you. So now I'm summing up because I have to show you one handout about reading critical thinking. Some websites are there, I will show you for sharing my screen. In summary, I can only say critical thinking, that is aimed at achieving the best possible outcome in any situation. Okay, in order to achieve this, it must involve gathering and evaluating information from as many different sources possible. Critical thinking requires a clear, often uncomfortable assessment of your personal strengths, weaknesses, and preferences, and their possible impact on decisions you make. Okay, critical thinking requires the development and use of foresight as far as this is possible. The famous fan about critical thinking, when I was reading a book of critical thinking, Doris Day was very famous. He sang, "The future's not ours to see." That's relevant to critical thinking. The future is not ours to see because we cannot see future. Implementing the decision made arising from critical thinking must take into account an assessment of possible outcomes and ways, okay, avoiding potentially negative outcomes or at least lessening them, okay, for their impact. Critical thinking involves reviewing the results of application of decision making made and implementing change where possible. Okay, it might be thought that we are overextending our demands on critical thinking in expecting that it can help to construct focus meaning rather than examining the information given and the acknowledge we have required to see if we can, if necessary, construct a meaning that will acceptable and useful, and that's will give you a very good success in the exam if you have these skills. After all, almost no information we have available to us, either externally or internally, carries any guarantee of its life or appropriateness. I think a neat step-by-step instruction may provide some sort of trellis on which our basic understanding of critical thinking can blossom. But it doesn't and cannot provide any assurance of certainty, utility, and longevity. That's very important. You must understand it's your personal intelligence brain, how it works. Okay, and then you can do critical thinking. Now I'm sharing the screen with you. for one of uh, the handout for critical thinking, just to give you one understanding, you must understand what is the actually this handout will give you reading critical thinking concept. So that's why I'm using my screen now. Just give me 1 minute, one second. I will share the screen. Okay. So this is I have shared the screen. If you can see now, uh, read critically. This has a handout is available on alternative format or request, but you can see it. Basically, what is critical thinking? That's the definition of critical thinking. Okay, that critical thinking is more active way of reading. It is deeper and more complex engagement with the text. It is reading. Okay, reading is a process of analyzing, interpreting, and sometimes evaluating. When we read critically, we use our critical thinking skill to question both the text and our reading of it. Different disciplines may have distinctive modes. Sometimes critical reading, scientific, philosophical, literary, it depends. Okay, on your when you're a health sciences student, you have scientific, maybe you have philosophical when you are reading philosophy. When you're reading English literature, you have literary type of critical reading. So this is the chart. What is the difference between reading and critical reading? That's the reading, and there's the critical reading. Purpose, activity, focus, and question. These are, if you can understand, okay. And what needs to be done to prepare for critical reading? Okay, that's the what you have to do. For example, here if you can see, reading purpose is to get basic grasp of the text. For critical reading, to form judgment about how a text works. Activity, reading you are absorbing, understanding, because you're making reading comprehension. But critical thinking is analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating. When you are focused, reading what a text says. When you're reading the passage, what the text say, or when you're reading a paragraph. But critical thinking, what a text does and means. That's the difference between reading and critical thinking. Questions: what is the text saying? Okay, how does that's in reading, but in critical thinking, how does the text work? How is it argued? That's your critical thinking. But when you're reading, what information can I get out of these questions? But when you are critical thinking, you think what are the choices made, the pattern, the result, what kind of reasoning and evidence are used, what are the underlying assumptions, what does the text means? Now, if we are talking about directions, when you're reading with the text taking for granted it is right, okay? But when you're critical thinking against the text, questioning its assumptions and argument, interpreting meaning in context, that's the difference. But for response, restatement and summary in reading, but for critical thinking, description, interpretation, and evaluation, because mainly you are doing evaluation. What needs to be done to prepare for critical thinking? That's as a reader, when you are going to do some exam, there are 2 steps to prepare to read critically. Self-reflect, what experiences, assumptions, knowledge, and perspective do you bring to the text? What biases might you have? Are you able to keep an open eye and consider other points of view? Okay, number 2, read to understand. What to read to understand? Examine the text and context, who is author, who is the publisher, where and when it is written, what kind of text it is. Probably you go for topic sentence, on also the background information of the author. Okay, the scheme, the text, what is the topic? Yes, I told you topic sentence also. What is the main idea? Resolve confusion, look up unfamiliar words or terms in dictionaries or glossaries, go over difficult passages to clarify them. And you read, you must go for vocabulary, okay, and to understand what is the difficult vocabulary. So what is the process of reading critically? To read critically, you must think critically. This involves analysis, interpretation, evaluation. Each of these processes helps you to interact with the text in different ways, highlighting important points and example, taking notes, testing answers to your questions, brainstorming, outlining, describing aspects of the text or argument. reflecting on your own reading and thinking, raising objections to the ideas or evidence presented. Okay, analysis asks what are the patterns of text. So sometimes reading a different, but sometimes you're reading a passage. Sometimes in the exam they give you a small paragraph and they ask you four questions. One is correct. So analysis means looking at the parts, something that delete patterns. In looking these patterns, your critical thinking skills will be engaged in analyzing the argument the author is making. What is the thesis or overall theory? That's the first question. What is the supporting point that create the argument? How do they relate to each other? How do they relate to the thesis? So when you are reading a passage, for critical thinking is you go for first what is the topic, what is the main idea, okay, and what is the topic sentence, and what are the supporting details, and what is the conclusion. So these you must have to understand very clearly. What are the examples used as evidence of supporting points? How do they relate to the points that they what to support to each other, to the thesis of the topic, or to the passage? What techniques of persuasion are used? Appeals of emotions, reasons, authority. What rhetorical strategies are used? Definition, explanation, description, narration, elaboration, argumentation, evaluation. The modes of analysis are used: illustration, comparison, contrast, cause, and effect. Process analysis, classification, division, definition. These are the modes which you can analyze. So interpretation asks, what do the patterns of the argument mean? Interpretation is reading ideas as well as sentences. We need to be aware of the cultural and historical context, the context of its author's life, the context of debates within the discipline at that time, and the intellectual context of debates within the discipline today. Number one, what debate were the author and the text engaging with at that time? What kind of reasoning, historical, psychological, political, philosophical, scientific are employed? What methodology is implied and what theory is developed? How might my reading for the text be biased? Am I imposing 21st century ideas or values on the text? If so, is this problematic? So evaluation. Ask, well, how well does the text do what it does? What is its value? So evaluation is making judgment. For example, in the exam, they give you a short paragraph, and that is about evaluation. Then four questions, and one will tell, are you able to evaluate it or not? The same like one paragraph, where they give you one statement, and then they ask you questions for multiple choice questions. One is correct. Are you able to understand the statement? So about the intelligent, cognitive, aesthetic, moral, or practical value of text, when we are considering its intellectual, cognitive value, we ask questions such as, how does it contribute to the discipline? Are its main conclusion original? Does the evidence and reasoning adequately support the theories presented, or the sources reliable? Is the argument logically consistent, convincing? Are any experiments, questionnaires, statistical section, designs and execution in accordance with the accepted standards of the relevant discipline? Okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the theory or the purpose given in the paragraph or passage? How would competing theories criticize the text? How could the author reply? What is the purpose of the author? Okay, what is the meaning of the author? What is the main idea the author is presenting? Overall, is the theory approach, is this text better than competing theories approaches? In other words, what are the comparative strengths and weaknesses in reading critically? We need to keep competing theories in mind. So for further reading, this handout tells you, for further study, quick web sources on critical reading. Karlan Dan, this is the criticalreading.com. Okay, not Deborah, critical reading towards critical writing. This website, okay, you can see Canadian website. It's about reading advice. Okay, and Wheeler, he has written a book with the critical reading of an essay's arguments, and Dr. Wheeler website is here. They are the famous one, handout also available on this website. Okay, University of Toronto, Canada, about critical thinking can be better for you. Inshallah, hopefully, this will be very helpful for you. And inshallah, we will meet you next video. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.